That was a fantastic job by Diane. It's great that you're now very familiar with a lot of the acronyms that we use in our industry, because like every industry, we're very guilty of using acronyms. So CAP, you now know as Capital Accumulation Plan. There's guidelines, there's set responsibilities. There will be some overflow. My presentation is going to be less wordy, more statistical. It's some analysis that was done on benchmark reporting over the last few years. I do want to throw out there, when you're using what we call big data or any type of research, it's not always statistically significant, and it doesn't tell you the whole picture either. Okay, so everybody here has their own unique needs. The information that's going to be presented is just a big mishmash of some of our clients that were interviewed and their feedback. So we're basically going to look at a basic description of the defined contribution plan, more acronyms, defined contribution plan, defined benefit plan. It's going to be a lot more centric to the defined contribution plan. I don't know if there's anybody here that participates in a DB plan. It's very unique, really to the policy holder. There's a plan text which is created which governs the policy, and it is absolutely unique to the employer or the policy holder. So to carve into that information today, we wouldn't have enough time. So I really want to focus on DC today. I do want to bring up pension reform debate, which started in 2009. So Diane talked about that gap of defined contribution, defined benefits coming down, and more cap coming up. The reason why is because the defined contribution plans and defined benefits plans are very arduous. They're also very costly. So there was a forum which got together to try and discuss what to do. I'll go over that. And then the trends, as I mentioned, from 2013, 2014 benchmark reports. And then I also wanted to throw in results that we achieved from talking to employees within these programs and seeing trends in terms of communication, contribution levels, etc. And then lastly, and not least, would be what makes a plan successful. That has not changed since the beginning of time, to be honest. So I like the keep it simple approach. And current trends in DB, which is basically just one slide, because the current trend in DBs is just going one way, it's going down. So it's a quick conversation. I'm not going to get into funding DBs, solvency ratios. I'm not an actuary. I understand it. If you want to talk about it after, we could do that. All right. So this should work. Perfect. So here we go. On the left-hand side, we could just focus on the defined contribution plan. So the cost is a known factor. That's good for the employer. So if you can budget 5% of your payroll to go into the program, that's very simple math. With the defined contribution, employer contributions do not attract payroll tax like they do in a lot of the CAP programs. The amount of the benefit for the employee is unknown. So that's why a lot of the service providers provide forecasting tools, calculators. If my employer puts in 5%, I put in 5%, what does that mean? We have to demystify that. And it's not an exact science. And that's the challenge. And it leads to some discomfort with a lot of employees. But, as Diane was saying, you got to get over the inertia. If no money goes in, if there's no meaningful contributions, you're definitely not on your way. There's a lot of employees that I speak with that say, should I have fund A, B, C, D, E, or F? And I ask, well, are you contributing to the plan? And the answer is no. So why don't we start by contributing in the plan before we spend 2 hours talking about the investment menu? Okay? The investment risk. Diane's touched on a lot of things that you'll see, but I'll just move along. The investment risk is all the employees. They have to find out how much they need to save. And often the amount that the employer is putting in is not enough to reach their financial goals. So a 5 and a 5 match might be good for some, might not be good for others. So you really have to have a goal, an endpoint, and work your way backwards. Okay? You can ask questions at any time, by the way. Defined benefit plan. The cost is an unknown factor to the employee, to the employer. So you're going in there and you don't know what it's going to cost you. But the benefit is known to the employee. So traditionally, a DB plan is set up with an equation. And the equation uses basically 3 multiples. One is going to be the payout ratio, which is, I'm in a real simple math, 2%. The next variable is going to be number of years of service. We'll use 35 years of service, which is pretty common, times a variable in terms of your earnings. It could be your best 5 years, your best 3 years, or your average earnings over the life of being an employee in the organization. So essentially, the employer has to fund that to equal what that equation is. So if you've 2%, 35 years, that's 70%. So they have to come up with 70% replacement value of your salary. And if you work for them for 30 years and you're going to be retired for 35 years, right? You can imagine the amount of money they have to sock away for you. Some of the DB plans are contributory, meaning employees also contribute into the programs. And I'll use an example, which is often spoke about, is the Ontario Teachers Plan. Everybody talks about how it's so coveted, and we hear about how they own airports and they own all kinds of fun things around the world. The reality is the teachers put in close to 10% up to the YMP, which is about $55,000. And above that, they contribute 13%. So go back to my earlier point. You have to make meaningful contributions in order to see benefits down the road. Now, understandably, the employer is also matching that and more. So that is why we see DBs going down. It really comes up to cost. This is basically the definition for the solvency ratio. So a DB plan every 5 years goes through what's called the solvency ratio, and that's the catastrophic, what happens if the world ends tomorrow and I have to pay out all of my liabilities? How much money do I need in the bank? So when you hear of a DB plan being unfunded, it just doesn't mean that the corporation isn't making money, doesn't mean that they're not making a lot of money or have a lot in the bank. It just means that if tomorrow came to an end and they had to pay out all their liabilities in terms of pensions, can they do it or can they not do it? And most don't have the money in the bank to accommodate that. In terms of the percentages, I categorized in this number here, the pension plan coverage in the private sector has dropped from 31% to just over 24%. That's 2012 to 2013. And the definition of pension plan would be a DC or a DB. DB, as you know, is declining, so they are closing and winding up, as we would call it, where there's an actual payout and the employer might move into a defined contribution with a fixed contribution schedule moving forward. And there's also a lot that are just freezing for new members. So it's called like a grandfather type clause. If you're there and the timing was right, you're good. And if you happen to be coming on board, welcome to the new world. Defined contribution. CAP plans, now that you're familiar with that, I don't need to go into that in any detail. Suffice to say, though, for employees and employers, although that registered pension plan is going down, savings are still going up through those CAP programs. So that's the good news. People continue to participate in retirement plans, and they continue to participate in savings for their retirement. There is one little note here, which CAP guidelines, or the CAP right here, the trend only applies really to the private sector, since only 1% of the public sector are covered by CAP. So this is really a private sector phenomena that we're seeing right now. We talked about the price right here in terms of why people are gravitating towards the DC versus the DB. If we get into the proposed pension in 2009, this is all stale dated, so we can look back in history and see who was right and who was wrong. I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. So in terms of the super fund, the concept was everybody just put all their money in the same place. That way there we get a big economy of scale on the investment management fees, right? It'd be dirt cheap to administer, and we're off to the races. The challenge was who's going to administer the fund? The other challenge is everybody's risk tolerance isn't the same. You can't have a one-size-fit-all when it comes to investments. The other thing is you have demographics to be concerned about. More people are retiring than people coming in. So the people moving out would get a lot of benefit. The people coming in may or may not see it at the end of the day. So that was a concern with the super fund. The big one in my mind was the administration. And we talked about the ORPP quickly, which is bullet point number 1. It hasn't been determined who's going to administer the ORPP yet. It wouldn't have been determined who would administer the super fund. But I can tell you it's documented that the cost of administering the CPP per year, $600 million exactly. 600 million out of zero. So that administration charge, as we all know with our individual savings, is going to come off right off the gross rate of return. So what are we left with? Okay, expanding CPP. Expanding the CPP could be a good idea. It's a mandatory contribution. You're obligated to contribute, sort of like the ORPP. But again, in our industry, a lot of people don't understand the CPP. They think it's a DB program, that they're going to get a guaranteed amount of money at the end of the day. We all contribute in good faith. But the way the CPP actually works is you put in roughly 5%, your employer puts in roughly 5%. Then it's times by your salary. up to the maximum of the YMP, which Diane mentioned, which is approximately $52,500 today. So it does put a cap. If you make more than that, you're not going to get more out of the CPP. And the reality is a lot of people, when they start working, aren't making that YMP. They're not making $52,500. My first job, I made $16,500 as a bank teller. You're just not there. So you could have 10, 15 years of your working lives where you're not contributing the maximum, which means you're not going to get the maximum back out. If you look at retirees today, they're pulling out half of the maximum allowable, approximately $7,500 a year. That's what the average retiree is pulling out right now. So ballpark, $650 a month, taxable income. So it's not going to carry us very far. And the last one, which is up on the top, is the government-sponsored DC plans. Government-sponsored DC plans, we threw some acronyms around. Yes, in Quebec, the VRSPP is moving forward. It's automatic enrollment. It is automatic escalation. Everything is great except for the fact that people can default out after 60 days. So it's an administrative, in my opinion, nightmare for a plan sponsor to administer a plan whereby they have to enroll everybody, and then within 60 days, everybody can unenroll. And then on the anniversary date, they have to enroll everybody, and everybody can unenroll again, et cetera, et cetera. So in Quebec, you're definitely better to put in your own plan. That's the bottom line. The other thing in Quebec is there's no mandatory employer contribution. Okay, so they're kind of missing the boat a little bit there in terms of getting the contribution levels up. ORPP, one thing I can say to Diane's point earlier is that their threshold is not the YMP of the $55,000. They actually want a replacement value built on $90,000. Their objective, if we work it backwards, is they want to replace 15% of your income up to based on a figure of $90,000. So their actuaries figured out that they need to put in 1.9% employer-employee, and that'll achieve the set objective. Again, we don't know more than what Graham and Diane spoke to on the ORPP. It's one of these, stay tuned. It will have to come out sooner or later, and the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is who's going to administer the plan. In Quebec, for the VRSPP, they basically went to private industry. So do the insurance companies, and a couple banks now qualify to provide that product solution. So they said to build the administration and record keeping that's required, they can't do it. So they went to the private industry. So I'm hoping they'll do the same with the ORPP. This is based on the CAP benchmark report. Like I said, it's very DC-centric. So what I want to share with you is what are employers today doing and what are the changes been over the years. I'm not going to get into plan design because, like I said, that's really a moving target with these types of programs. So if we can see in terms of eligibility here, and the eligibility to participate, there is some RSP numbers in there. We'll just focus on the DC. If we look at the DC plans, 50–60% are eligible to have immediate participation within the 6-month period. That's a good thing. Immediate or within a year, I think, is appropriate. A lot of our clients line it up with their eligibility period for their benefits program, just to keep it simple from a communication perspective. So if it takes 3 months to get onto your benefits program, 6 months to get on your benefits program, usually the same will apply to your retirement program. The major shift that we've seen here in terms of immediate eligibility is if we break down our sample of companies with 500 employees and less, and 500 employees and more. The numbers in terms of immediate eligibility for firms with 500 employees and less practically doubled. In 2012, the eligibility for immediate was about 20%, and now it's close to 39%. So a big jump in saying, you know, we should let people on board right away. So does the employee contribute to the DC pension plan? So again here, I want to look at some trends in terms of yes and no, and we can see it's pretty flat. So most DC contribution plans will require an employee contribution or a matching formula. If we look by type of industry, these are the industry sectors on the left-hand side for the DC plans. The employee contributions are in brown and the company contributions are in blue. So we can see in certain sectors, the trend is definitely the employer is contributing more than the employee, and it's not an even match. So I don't know where you would fall into in that category, but you could seek that out. The trend is, over the years, the employee contributions have not changed significantly. This is the employee and company contributions as a percentage of the employee's salary. So again, we see the trending going from 2009 right up through 2003. And again, this is an aggregate number, and I always throw a caution out there with an aggregate number. Never tells the whole story. You could have, as an example, some of these clients are unionized, which would have a collective bargaining agreement in there where there's a higher contribution from the employer's behalf. But they've been relatively stable. Does your plan provide, and here we go, this is really the cornerstone. Diane talked a lot about this in detail. This trend is only going up. People have to make informed decisions. Plan sponsors have to provide retirement tools so people can make those informed decisions. Forecasting, as I mentioned, is critical in this environment. You need to look at it as holistic as your household. My husband or wife works here, I work here, she saves that, I save this, etc. Those exercises need to be done. We'll see in another slide, more and more people are using financial planners, which is also another really good component here as a plan sponsor. As a plan sponsor, you can always engage a consultant such as Graham, who can offer his expertise and put it into a holistic picture for you. Certified financial planners as well also abide by a code of ethics. So if you bring them your enrollment guide and say, my employer is putting in 3% and I'm putting in 3%, I need help selecting my menu, they're going to definitely coach you towards, number one, participating in the program, and will probably most definitely help you with your investment choices. Those stats probably don't surprise anybody. Now, this one surprises me a little bit in terms of basis for the plan's contributions. So we have the employee's earnings and we have employee contributions. So employee contribution would imply a matching program. So I'm surprised the matching program isn't higher than 40%. Sometimes it's just based on earnings. We'll put 3% on your earnings, irregardless of whether you contribute or you don't contribute. I would have assumed that's a little higher. The trend is going towards that sort of combination, which would use a couple of these variables. So we will match the employee's contributions based on your earnings, based on potentially different classes of employees like Diane spoke to. If you've worked here for 1 to 5 years, it's a 3% match. 5 to 10, it's a 5, and over 5 or over 10 years, you've earned an 8% type of matching program. So the trend there is to use multiple variables in determining the contribution rates. In terms of benchmark reporting, this I wanted to share with you. We talked on investment menus. Part of your fiduciary responsibility actually is to oversee the investment menu. Don't know if you were aware of that, but that's part of those CAP guidelines. So you do want a really good backstop in terms of your service provider. You want to make sure that they have a very comprehensive investment management review process. That's one of those things Diane said you want maybe to avail yourself of. That's usually one of them that we see. The trend that we see in terms of investments starting 2009 through 2013 is target date and target risk. Do those names sound familiar to most people? I'll go through them really quickly. 2 different philosophies. Target date is I'm going to retire in 30 years. So you select the fund with the 2044 fund. 30 years from today, 2044 fund. And essentially what it's going to do is say, Dean, you have 30 years ahead of you, so you can handle a lot of risk today in equities because you're in it for the long run. And then as you transition through your working career, we're going to reduce the amount of equity, and we're going to, so it's actively managed, we're going to then increase the amount of fixed income and stability in your portfolio as you move forward. It's all done for me. I can't choose the investments. I can't choose what they call the glide path. I want a little more here and a little more there. It just happens for me. And there's a lot of statistics and methodology put behind this by a lot of smart people, and it does work. It's just a matter of whether when you're young you like a lot of risk, because that's what you're going to get. And if you're older, if you like a lot of fixed income, some people still like a lot of risk because, let's face it, we're retired also for another 35 years. Diane, I just talked about deaccumulation before. I read an article that says 60% of the money we make on our money will be made during our retirement. because the foundation is that much bigger, right? Percentage on a bigger amount. So 60% of our net worth actually is made during our deaccumulation. Kind of seems weird, right? Target risk, as the term implies, it's based, you go through an investment personality questionnaire. Anybody that's ever invested at the bank or anywhere else, you've gone through this process, and it's going to determine whether you're conservative, moderate, or very aggressive. The one caution there is if you ever have a major lifestyle change, or as you get on in your career, you should definitely revisit your investment personality questionnaire to ensure that you're still aligned with your appropriate risk tolerance. You could always be conservative, or you could always be aggressive, but some people also change. Okay. The next slide is with regards to default funds. So with regards to default funds, this is for employees that are not prepared to make an investment decision at enrollment. I'm starting to see a little bit more of this in that people want to take their enrollment package home, talk to somebody, maybe present it to the financial advisor, etc. Insurance companies cannot accept remittances from employers and not allocate the money. We have to put it somewhere. The reason why is because this money is your employees' money. It's called segregated. It's off our balance sheets. It's not our money, right? So it has to be allocated. So we set up a default fund. Now, this has evolved over the years. Money market used to be really big. Money market used to be about 25%. It's now 15%. Reason why is money market's not a good long-term holding. So a lot of people that are going into the default funds, I shouldn't assume, but don't choose not to want to make an investment decision. So it's important now in today's world for the employer to vet the default fund, to lean on their advisor and also lean on their service provider to come up with an appropriate default fund. More and more of those target date funds are being used because they can be aligned based on birth dates and predicted retirement ages at 65. So everybody's homework's done and everybody's happy. Your service provider should also be able to provide you with a report at your request, who's in the default fund by default and who's in it potentially by choice. Because you could have somebody says, I want to be in target date by choice, and there's other people that default in. That's an exercise you should go through annually or every couple of years, and I'd strongly recommend sending a letter to your employees as well, notifying them that this might not be an appropriate long-term investment decision, encourage them to go back and use the tools provided by the service provider. We see balance fund at 30%. We see the target date here, and we see money market as the top three. Okay, there's a little percentage sign missing here. So this is with regards to the investment menu. So how many people are using Canadian bond funds in their investment menu? There should be 61%. How many people are using Canadian equity active in their investment menu fund? This should say, is that 60? 60%. So those should all be percentiles, okay? The average investment fund menu is 18 funds. As per CAP guidelines, what you want to do is ensure that you have enough choice for everybody in terms of risk tolerance. You want to ensure that so you have each asset category available, bonds, equity, foreign equity, maybe some alternative, maybe some special equity, maybe not. And then within those asset categories, you have choice. So in the Canadian equity space, you could have index funds. You could have a value fund manager and you could have a growth fund manager, and they both have different objectives. A value fund manager looks at balance sheet stability, maybe pays a dividend. A growth stock would be something that, well, my sales are great and they're going to double 50% year over year. They're top line driven. So different philosophies, right? So you just want to make sure you have a well-diversified investment menu. This hasn't changed much over the last 3 years in terms of percentages. We have seen the bonds come down a little bit, and we've seen the target date come up a little bit, and the risk-adjusted asset allocation. As I mentioned, the average number of investment options is 18. The average employee holds, it's not a round figure, so it seems weird, but 3.4 investments out of the 18. And some hold as much as 18, but again, 3.4 usually gives you pretty good diversification. When we talked about auto-escalation before, this slide goes against everything we've been talking about in the industry. This is automatic increases by our defined contribution plan policyholders from 2008 to 2012. We actually see the trend going down. We want to see the trend going up in terms of auto-escalation. I don't have the answers for us why. That's just the numbers. And I'll show you a slide later where 60% of employees agree that auto-escalation is important. So the employee is saying it's important and we're not doing it. There's a disconnect, right? Okay, this is the earlier slide just showing the trending in terms of investment advice. We all know the investment advice is going up. This slide I thought was really interesting. What could your employer do to encourage you to save more? The number one was increase my salary. So that's great, but how do we make sure that gets directed back to the plan? Increase contributions by employer. So I mean, these are things that we should be looking at around the room today as HR individuals. Increasing contributions by the employer. So putting the carrot out there. It doesn't always have to be a direct match. It could be 25 cents on the dollar. So every percentage you put in, we're going to put in 25 basis points. Or, you know, those types of thresholds. It really works. Match employee contributions. So they're looking for the employer to participate. Bonuses is a little lower. Bonuses are nice, but a lot of people plan on year-end bonuses to pay their Visa bills and their MasterCard bills that they get at Christmas. I hate to say it, but that's the reality. I really don't like the term RSP season in the first quarter of the year. There's no such thing as a season. It's not hunting. It should be year-round. People should be participating through payroll. Okay? So bonuses, although they can be transferred into a CAP program, tax-free, and we strongly encourage that in the industry. A lot of employees might get that $1,000. Do they need the whole $1,000? Probably not. But you know what? If it goes through payroll, they pay tax on $1,000. So if you don't need that $1,000, why not put 50% into your CAP plan? Tax sheltered. You can still get it out later. The plan permits you to take out voluntary withdrawals, I'm sure. Most are designed that way. And then only get taxed on what you need. Just a suggestion. So this one here is what could your employer do or provide that would increase your engagement? Okay, so this is for unengaged plan participants. Unengaged plan participants are saying all we need is more information. Simple as that. And service providers, I'm not going to pull Diane into this one here, but service provider, we have a hard time sometimes getting in front of employees. Everybody's busy, we get it, but it's important, and for good plan governance, it should be documented that you've approached your employees at least once, offered them to attend a WebEx, right? So I understand everybody's busy, hard to get everybody in the room at one place. WebExes and conference calls are taking off like crazy. Leverage the technology and have those types of communication efforts. This one here, we're doing on time, good, we're good. We're good. So based on a self-assessment knowledge of, this one's a little long-winded. So we're looking at very knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, not very knowledgeable, not at all. But they're testing them on 5 criteria all at the same time. I don't know why they didn't break it into 5 slides. But we're looking at employee retirement. So how knowledgeable are you on your retirement plan, asset allocation, investment risk tolerance, the amount you need to contribute, and the money, and reading your plan statement. I mean, that's a mouthful even just trying to read the slide. I don't know why they didn't break it up. But 51% say they understand all 5. Very good knowledge. We think that's good, but we also have the other 49% that are kind of out to lunch. So again, these statistics could be improving through better member communication strategies. And service providers and your consultant absolutely would like to help you with those endeavors. I do have some stats here in terms of trending with regards to the asset allocation. So that's diversifying your own portfolio. In 2010, that number was as high as 34%. Understood it very well. 2011, it dropped down to 25%. In terms of your investment risk tolerance, in 2010, it was up at 45%, said excellent or very good. It dropped down to 36%. The realities in the marketplace sometimes brings people's confidence down in volatile markets as well. So you think you know what you don't know. And then the market hits and you get a little nervous. So this is the financial advisor slide. And I think it's real easy to say that people with more money seek out financial advice. And people that are older seek out financial advice. Right? I think it's pretty common sense. Although everybody should have a financial plan. There was another stat which I didn't show here which talked about all these people are seeing financial advisors, but how many actually have a written financial plan? And the numbers dropped down into 20%. So although you're seeing a financial advisor, I would encourage looking for a holistic financial plan, right? That's the worth in the consultant outside of the realm of just doing the group RSP. right? We, the service provider, is only going to speak to the group RSP. We're not going to speak to the other financial planning needs you might have out there, whether it be insurance, the money at the bank, and making sure it's all tied in. All right, so this is with regards to how would you describe your risk tolerance. And the risk tolerance, it goes by years. So 2008 is the white, and then we get into darker shades. The aggressive, so what we wanted to see is over the years, so we had the financial crash here. How did that impact different risk tolerance levels? So obviously, the people who thought they were very aggressive had a bit of a wake-up call in 2009. Right? When you lose 35% of your portfolio, you might decide I'm no longer aggressive. Wasn't the time to fold the cards though, because if you stayed in, you got all your money back. So people that jumped out that didn't get their money back. But again, through payroll, you benefit from that dollar cost averaging. You're not timing markets, right? So that's a real big benefit of offering your employees the cap product. And then we saw it pick back up. Moderate, barely changed, and conservative over here. So I think that's good news. People aren't running for the hills when the markets go up and down. This is the slide that I was talked to a little bit earlier with regards to the auto enrollment and auto escalation of the contributions. So employees are on board. So why aren't we doing it? The answer is we should be doing it. In these benchmark reports, they change the questions. So they're not always consistent. So I don't have a follow-up to this one yet. But I was really floored by this. I mean, I don't use a lot of this stuff, to be frank, but I know there are a lot of people that do. And so in your view, how useful would it be if your organization or your plan provider used the following social media to provide information? Wow, a lot of people said, not useful. Very interesting, very interesting. Service providers are all over videos now and YouTube and all that stuff, so I can't wait to measure it. The other thing which I would have liked to have seen here would have been mobile devices. Right? I'm not sure where mine is, but everybody has a mobile device. And in 2011, 20% of the people said they use their mobile device either to get financial information or do financial transactions. So service providers have been moving more and more into this mobile strategy as well too. It's here, it's the future, there's no way around it. So I'd love to see some numbers and some matrices on the mobile moving forward. The other big trend that you can see in some of the service providers is this, it's called gamification. It's a buzzword, gamification. So I don't know if it's all for the MTV kids that are coming through. They need all that sensory overload stuff flashing at them. And again, I'd love to see the statistics on it. We don't have them yet. But that's one of the ways that service providers are trying to reach out in unique ways to attract and engage employees. This is hard copy. Basically, all this is saying is follow demographics. The people who are retiring are from a generation that like reading paper. So just acknowledge it. Paper's never going to go away, unfortunately. This one here talks about how often have you reviewed certain items that are provided to you by your employer. So I've reviewed all the retirement investment statements. Okay? This is year over year. But the statistic from 2008, there was 72% of respondents said that they had read all the retirement investment statements. Statements in our industry were always said to be the #1 communication method with employees. And we went from 72% in 2008 down to 1/3. I don't know, again, if it's just overload or not, but we have to ensure that people are opening their mail, reading the information so they can make sure they're on track moving forward. Website usage has gone up over the years since 2006, and there's some other information for reference purpose. So this is what we look at. Joining early, meaningful contributions, investment choice, impact of withdrawals. I'll speak to that one. So I got a couple slides here. You've seen all these before. So this is if you get in early, what you're going to have versus what you get in later. Same contribution amounts. The only difference is this one got in 15 years earlier than the 35-year-old. With regards to meaningful contributions, if you go from a 2 and 2 match to a 5 and a 5 over 45 years, that's a long time, you get almost $800,000 difference at retirement. Big numbers. So even if your employer's doing 2 and 2, doesn't mean you can't put extra money in on a voluntary basis through payroll deduction. Take advantage of the reduced investment management fees, dollar cost averaging, all that. It's all done for you. And the withdrawals. This is interesting. Between 1990 and 2000, so a 10-year period, Approximately 60% of Canadians contributed to their RSPs. 60%. You'd like to see the number higher, but there's a reality there. 25% of them also made a withdrawal. So look at the significance of a withdrawal at $20,000 at age 40. I mean, you're probably looking at about $100,000 maybe a difference, right? So withdrawals can be significant, and it is a taxable event. Again, it's all about cost. Somebody has to pay. It's the employee, it's the employer, and this is we're talking private industry. We're not talking public where it comes out of general tax revenues. Okay? This is private industry. Large employers also have moved away from the DB plans. Demographics play a big side. We'll get into that. Private sector establishments in 2011, only 10% provided defined benefit plans covering 18% of the private industry. So in 2011, only 18% of people who work in the private industry are covered by a DB plan. Most of them were unionized. If we look at unionized versus non-unionized, look at Ontario, our manufacturing industry, right? Where's that gone? There's a lot of unionized people. We see the drop in unionized people year over year by 12% in terms of pension plan coverage. On the non-unionized side, we see it down 54%, and only 13% now have coverage. Those are big numbers. Government-related causes, we talked about complexities. I won't get into them all. Funding is huge. Also, what do we do with surpluses, et cetera, et cetera. Demographic-related causes. Here's one not everybody stops to think about. There's more women in the workforce, right? Women live longer. So when is living longer a bad thing? When you manage a DB program. So more women are working, life expectancy for women is more, and the life expectancy for men is also going up more. And the mathematicians use mortality tables to make these calculations. So everybody talks about how we're going to continue to live more, so the cost is going to continue to go up. DB plans in the private sector are not without significant risk to the plan members. So again, DB is on balance sheet. Company goes down, those assets could be at jeopardy. Okay? So as an individual employee, you know, you say DB is great, I might have this big payout, there's a big cost, but there's also a security element in a defined contribution plan where your money is segregated off the balance sheet. And I hate to use a close example, but Nortel is an example right here in Ottawa. Decline DB plans private sector, so a huge dichotomy. And lastly, I'll leave you with this mouth-jawing statistic from C.D. Howe. And basically a DB plan, look at that number, like 33%. That's a big number. Not a lot of private companies can contribute 33% into a DB plan for an individual employee, let alone their medical benefits. So I'll leave you with that today. Thank you very much for your time. I want to respect my time. Yes, sir.
Could you give us your perspective or view of Great-West Life's the ORPP? Where do you think it's going to unfold or how it will unfold?
Okay. I could say where we'd like to see it unfold. So I'll go back to the VRSPP example.
Can you explain what that
It's a voluntary registered pension plan. Voluntary registered pension plan. It's in Quebec, and you have to have one enforced by the end of December 2016. So if you have employees in Quebec, I provided a cheat sheet, which is a PDF to Rondi, so we'll make that available to you. There's a quick cheat sheet on the VRSPP for any Quebec employees you have. We would like to see them turn to the private industry, being the insurers, once again, to administer the program. That way there we can throw all our tools at it, we can throw online enrollment at it, and we can make sure the administrative costs are reasonable. The other thing is we want individuals to be able to have choice in terms of how their money is invested. So again, if they leverage our platform where our defined contribution and CAP members can select their own investments, we'd like to see that as well too. We don't want to see a super fund administered by the government.